You were never wrong. You were never lost. You were never insane. You just saw before they were ready to understand. You spoke truths that challenged their comfort. You questioned what they were conditioned to accept. You shattered the illusions they desperately clung to. And instead of listening, instead of opening their minds, they laughed at you. They called you a dreamer, a lunatic, a fool. But now, everything you said is happening right in front of them. And suddenly, their laughter is gone. Their confidence has faded. Their words have disappeared. Because reality has proven you right. And now, they don't know what to do. Before we go further, I want you to declare something in faith. Comment below, "I am not afraid of mockery." Let it be known. Let it be heard. Let it be felt. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and watch until the end, because this message is about to set you free. History repeats itself. Every revolutionary, every visionary, every truth-bearer has been called crazy before they were proven right. Galileo was called a heretic because he said the Earth was not the center of the universe. Nikola Tesla was ridiculed when he predicted wireless energy. The first doctor to suggest washing hands before surgery was thrown into an asylum. And yet, what happened? The world caught up. The very people who laughed, the very people who mocked, the very people who rejected, they eventually had no choice but to accept the truth. Light bulb, and the same thing is happening with you. You said things they weren't ready to hear. You saw things they weren't ready to see. You walked in knowledge they weren't prepared to understand. So they called you crazy. Not because you were wrong, but because they weren't ready to admit that you were right. They mocked you to protect their own comfort. They dismissed you to hold on to their ignorance. But now, the truth has become undeniable. And suddenly, their laughter has turned into silence. This is the pattern of the world. At first, they ignore you. Then, they mock you. Then, they fight you. And finally, they pretend they always believed you. It happens every single time. They laughed at the idea of planes before they became normal. They laughed at the idea of the internet before they couldn't live without it. They laughed at the idea of electric cars before they started driving them. They are laughing at you now, but soon, they will act like they always knew you were right. Because mockery is not about truth, it's about resistance to change. They never actually proved you wrong. They never actually had real arguments against you. They never actually had a logical reason to reject what you said. They just didn't want to believe it. And so, they laughed. But now that the very things you predicted are happening, now that the very things you warned them about are unfolding, now that the very things you stood for are being proven true, they don't have a single word to say. The problem was never that you were wrong. The problem was that you were ahead of them. You saw through the illusions before they shattered. You understood the lies before they were exposed. You walked in clarity while they were still blind. And instead of questioning themselves, instead of opening their minds, instead of searching for truth, they mocked you. Because it was easier to laugh than to think. But truth doesn't care if people are ready for it. Truth does not wait for permission. Truth does not adjust itself to make people comfortable. Truth does not need approval to remain true. And now, truth has caught up with them. Everything they denied, everything they ignored, everything they dismissed, it's now undeniable. And they are scrambling. They are pretending they never mocked you. They are pretending they never doubted you. They are pretending they always knew what you knew. Light bulb, because that's what people do when they realize they were wrong. ####. The world mocks what it doesn't understand. People fear what they do not understand. And what they fear, they mock. When you saw things differently, they feared you. When you spoke truths that challenged them, they feared you. When you refused to conform to their thinking, they feared you. So they laughed. Not because they were stronger. Not because they were smarter. Not because they had any real argument. Fire, they laughed because it was the only defense they had. They needed to convince themselves that you were crazy. Because if you were right, that meant everything they believed was wrong. And that was too much for them to handle. So instead of listening, instead of learning, instead of thinking, they mocked you. But truth has a way of proving itself. And now, their mockery has turned into silence. The world is catching up. The people who mocked you are now confused. The ones who dismissed you are now questioning everything. The ones who called you crazy are now realizing they were blind. And you? You never needed their approval. You never needed their validation. You never needed them to believe in you. Because you always knew the truth. Fire, you were always ahead of them. And now, they have to catch up to you. This is only the beginning. We will dive even deeper into how they will try to rewrite history, how they will pretend they never mocked you, how they will act as if they always knew what you knew. Because mockery always turns into imitation. Stay with me, the best is yet to come. The greatest minds, the visionaries, the revolutionaries, they were all called crazy before they were recognized as geniuses, not because they were wrong, not because they were delusional, not because they were lost, but because they saw what others could not see yet. You are not insane for seeing patterns others ignore. You are not delusional for recognizing shifts before they happen. You are not lost for understanding things before the world is ready. Your mind moves ahead of time. You are not bound by the present reality, because your thoughts have already traveled into the future. The people who call you crazy, they are still catching up, because the truth is this: light bulb, the future is always crazy, until it becomes the present. Fire, people like you don't guess, you just know. They don't reject your words because you are wrong. They reject your words because they don't have the vocabulary to understand what you see. The first people who talked about electricity were called madmen. The first people who believed the earth was round were called heretics. The first people who dreamed of flying were laughed at, not because they were wrong, but because the world was not ready for their knowledge. And the same thing is happening now. You are speaking the language of what's coming. You are explaining what will soon be obvious to everyone. You are trying to wake them up to a reality they are not ready to process. And instead of learning, instead of asking questions, instead of listening, fire, they mock you, not because you are mistaken, but because they don't want to believe what you are saying is possible. Light bulb, they would rather laugh at the future than accept that they are behind. People do not fight for truth. People fight to protect their comfort. They don't oppose you because they have real arguments against you. They oppose you because if you are right, they will have to rethink everything they believe, and that is terrifying to them. If they accept your truth, it means they have been blind this whole time. It means they have been living in ignorance. It means they have to let go of their false sense of security. That is why they don't just ignore you. They actively fight against you, because it's easier to label you crazy than to admit they were wrong. Fire, every revolution has been resisted, not because it was wrong, but because it threatened what already existed. They don't fear you because you are mistaken. They fear you because if you are right, their entire world collapses. They don't want change. They don't want to grow. They don't want to confront reality. So instead, they fight the messenger of truth, because it's easier to destroy the one who brings the message than to accept that the message is real. Light bulb, but truth does not need their permission to be true. And now, truth is catching up to them. the world always laughs at. Visionaries before it worships them. The same people who mock you today will one day quote your words as if they always believed in you. Every great idea, every revolutionary concept, every breakthrough. It was once labeled insanity before it became common knowledge. They called early scientists heretics before their discoveries became the foundation of modern knowledge. They ridiculed inventors for ideas that are now everyday necessities. They dismissed dreamers, only to later build their world around those very dreams. What is called madness today will become wisdom tomorrow. They act like you're crazy because they can't yet see what you see. They act like you're delusional because they can't yet comprehend the reality you understand. But reality does not wait for them to be comfortable. The future does not slow down for them to catch up, fire, and when the truth finally manifests, they will pretend they always supported you, because that's how history works. At first, they resist, then, they mock, then, they fight, and finally, they rewrite history to pretend they were on your side all along. Light bulb, the truth does not need their approval. It moves forward regardless. The problem is not that they need you to be wrong. The problem is that they need you to fail. Because if you succeed, if you prove them wrong, if what you said turns out to be true, fire, their entire world will collapse. They will have to confront the fact that they spent their lives believing a lie. They mocked what they did not understand. They resisted the very thing that was meant to help them. And that is too painful for them to accept. So they don't fight you because they have evidence against you. They fight you because if you win, they lose control over their illusion. They want you to fail so they never have to question their own beliefs. They don't resist you because they hate you. They resist you because they fear what you represent. Fire, they are not fighting you. They are fighting change itself. And they would rather see you fall than be forced to evolve. But here's the reality. Light bulb truth does not need their acceptance to become real. Your success is not waiting for their permission. Your vision is not dependent on their approval. Your future is not tied to their understanding. The only thing that matters is this: truth always wins in the end. And when it does, they will do what they always do. They will rewrite history. The people who mocked you will become the first to act like they always believed in you. They will teach your ideas in schools. They will write books about the very truths they once rejected. They will pretend they saw it coming all along. Fire, because no one wants to admit they were wrong. They will erase their own mockery. They will hide their own resistance. They will twist the narrative so that history remembers them as supporters instead of doubters. They will pretend that they were open to the truth the whole time. They were always on the right side. They knew all along that things would turn out this way. But you remember. Light bulb, you remember the way they looked at you. Light bulb, you remember the way they laughed. Light bulb, you remember the way they tried to silence you. They will rewrite history, but you know the truth. And no matter how much they try to change the story, no matter how much they try to erase their past mockery, no matter how much they try to act like they always believed, fire, you know who they really are. Because history does not truly repeat itself, it just learns to hide the truth better, and now, they will have to live with the fact that they were on the wrong side of history. The world is built on systems, laws, traditions, structures, and control, and you don't fit into their system, you don't play by their rules, you don't accept their limits. That is why they fear you, not because you are wrong, but because you cannot be controlled. They were comfortable with a world where everyone thought the same way, where no one questioned the rules, where no one stepped outside the boundaries they created. And then you came along. You challenged what they never dared to question. You spoke truths they tried to suppress. You lived outside the limitations they blindly accepted. Fire, and that made you dangerous. Because when one person proves the system is a lie, it threatens the illusion for everyone else. And they knew, if you succeeded, others would follow. If you broke free, others would realize they could too. So they did everything they could to stop you. They mocked you. They doubted you. They tried to discredit you, not because they wanted the truth, but because they needed the lie to survive. But the truth, light bulb truth does not die just because people refuse to accept it, and now, that truth is spreading. Now, that truth is becoming undeniable. They tried to silence you, but instead, they amplified you. They tried to break you, but instead, they strengthened you. They tried to erase you, but now, your presence is impossible to ignore. Fire. A person who does not need validation cannot be manipulated, and that is what they fear the most. You were never part of their plan, and now, you have destroyed it completely. Every time they mocked you, every time they dismissed you, every time they tried to make you doubt yourself, it was never about confidence. It was never about truth. It was never about logic. Fire. It was always about fear, because if you were right, that meant everything they believed in was wrong. And that was too terrifying for them to face. So instead of questioning their own beliefs, instead of confronting their own insecurities, instead of stepping into the unknown, they laughed at you, not because they thought you were crazy, but because they needed you to be wrong so they could stay in their comfort zone. They needed to believe you were a fool, so they wouldn't have to face the reality that they were the blind ones. Fire. They don't fight you because they hate you. They fight you because they fear what you represent. But here's the truth, light bulb, you never needed them. You never needed their approval. You never needed their belief. You never needed their validation. But they needed you to stay small. They needed you to fail. They needed you to prove their worldview was still intact. But you didn't, and now, they are left with nothing but the realization that they were wrong. You didn't create a new reality. You didn't invent something out of thin air. You simply recognized what was always there. The world was blind. The world was asleep. The world was trapped in a false narrative, and you saw through it before anyone else did. You didn't manifest a new world. You simply remembered a truth the world had forgotten. And now, fire. Now they will never be able to unsee it. Because the truth is no longer hidden. Because the truth is no longer whispered. Because the truth is no longer something they can pretend isn't real. And it doesn't matter if they acknowledge it. It doesn't matter if they accept it. It doesn't matter if they ever admit you were right. Light bulb. Because you don't need them to remember your name. Light bulb. You just need them to remember that they were wrong. And they will. Because the very thing they rejected, the very thing they mocked, the very thing they tried to destroy, fire, has now become their reality. And they will spend the rest of their lives pretending they always knew.